Get this. You ready for this? What if I told you the Titanic never actually sank?
Whoa.
Buckle up. This deep dive is going straight for a historical conspiracy iceberg. The Titanic switch theory.
Yeah, that's right. This theory claims that the ship that tragically went down in 1912 wasn't the Titanic.
Oh, okay.
It was her older sister, the Olympic,
Okay.
cleverly disguised as part of an insurance scam.
I know what you're thinking. Sounds crazy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But hang on. The Olympic had a history. That makes this theory surprisingly intriguing.
Yeah, she did.
Okay.
The Olympic actually experienced 2 major collisions before the Titanic's maiden voyage. One was a minor incident with a tugboat. The second, however, was a serious collision with the HMS Hawk, a British warship. The damage was extensive.
A warship, that's not just bad luck. That's like a maritime curse.
Yeah.
So this begs the question, was the Olympic so badly damaged that it made more sense to, like, swap her out with the Titanic?
That's the heart of the theory.
Okay.
And, if we consider the financial strain on the White Star Line at the time,
Yeah.
coupled with the fact that they had a brand new, almost identical ship in the Titanic nearing completion.
Yeah.
Well, you can see how this theory starts to gain some traction.
I'm starting to see the pieces fall into place here.
Yeah.
So, a damaged ship, financial pressure, and then a shiny new replacement waiting in the wings. But how could they possibly pull off a switcheroo like this without anyone noticing?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Conspiracy theorists point to a few curious discrepancies.
Okay.
They believe they support the swap.
Sure.
For example, the Titanic, after launch, seemed to acquire 2 extra portholes on A deck.
Really?
And then there's the spacing of the B deck windows. They appear uneven on the Titanic, but not on the Olympic. These subtle differences, they argue, are telltale signs of a switch.
Different windows. That's interesting. But wouldn't someone somewhere have noticed something, like the shipbuilders, crew members? Someone.
You'd think so.
Yeah.
However, proponents of this theory argue that most people wouldn't have been scrutinizing the ships that closely. Plus, the Titanic, unlike the Olympic, wasn't open for public viewing before her maiden voyage.
I see.
So that limits the chance of someone spotting those discrepancies.
Yes, scrutiny, less chance of getting caught.
Yeah.
This is starting to sound like a very elaborate, very risky plan.
Mm-hmm.
But let's be realistic. Swapping 2 massive ocean liners? That must have been a logistical nightmare.
Absolutely.
Wow.
It would have required a staggering level of coordination and secrecy. Just think about it. You'd have to switch the names, the furnishings, even the lifeboats, and do all of this while keeping it completely under wraps.
Right.
It seems almost inconceivable.
So on one hand, we've got this intriguing theory with some curious evidence to support it.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other hand, the sheer scale of this operation makes it seem almost impossible. This is getting tricky.
It is, but we're just scratching the surface here.
Wow.
The alleged switch is only one part of this intricate theory. There are other curious details about the Titanic's voyage and the events leading up to the sinking that we need to explore.
Like what? What else could possibly add fuel to this already blazing fire of a theory?
Well, there are claims that the Titanic's insurance policy
Yeah.
was mysteriously boosted just days before her departure, suggesting a possible motive for a deliberate sinking.
Wow.
And then there's the curious case of J.P. Morgan, the tycoon who owned the White Star Line's parent company. He abruptly canceled his trip on the Titanic, citing health concerns, but was later spotted, perfectly healthy, at a French resort.
Wait. The owner of the company bailed on the voyage at the last minute. Now that is undeniably suspicious.
It certainly raises eyebrows.
Yeah.
But remember, we're examining this from all sides.
Okay.
Critics of the switch theory argue there's no concrete evidence linking Morgan to any kind of insurance fraud, and that his cancellation could have been a genuine coincidence.
Okay, fair point. But even if we set aside the insurance angle for a moment, there's still the big question. How could a ship deemed unsinkable go down so quickly? Was it just bad luck? Or was something else at play?
That question takes us to another intriguing detail. A coal bunker fire that was burning on the Titanic before she even left Belfast.
A fire? You mean there was a fire on board the Titanic before it even set sail? This is getting good.
Yes, and it's not a widely known fact.
Okay.
Now, some experts believe this fire could have compromised the Titanic's hull, making her more vulnerable to the iceberg's impact.
So was this fire just a terrible accident?
Mm-hmm.
Or could it have been part of a much larger, more sinister plan? This is starting to feel like a plot twist in a movie.
That's a question historians continue to debate.
Yeah.
Some conspiracy theorists believe the fire was either intentionally started or allowed to burn unchecked as a crucial element of the alleged insurance scam.
Oh, no.
Others maintain it was an unfortunate incident that had no bearing on the sinking.
All right, so far we've got a potentially swapped ship, a last-minute insurance increase, a canceled trip by the owner, and a fire on board before it even left the dock. Where do we go from here?
To further muddy the waters, we need to talk about another ship.
Okay.
The California.
The California. What does another ship have to do with the Titanic? I'm hooked.
The Californian was another vessel owned by, you guessed it, J.P. Morgan. It left port a few days before the Titanic.
Okay.
Here's where it gets strange. The Californian was fully coaled, but carried no passengers or cargo, only a large shipment of woolen sweaters and blankets.
Okay, woolen sweaters. Now that is a head-scratcher. What was the purpose of that?
It's a peculiar detail that has fueled all sorts of speculation.
Okay.
Adding to the mystery, the Californian stopped in the middle of the Atlantic on the night of the Titanic sinking, right in the middle of an ice field.
Don't leave me hanging.
It received multiple ice warnings, but didn't act on them.
Oh, wow.
Even more puzzling is the Californian's captain, Stanley Lord. He allegedly chose to sleep fully clothed on a couch in the chart room instead of his cabin that night.
It's almost as if he was anticipating something to happen.
That's exactly what some people believe.
Yeah.
There's a theory. The Californian was intended to be the Titanic's rescue ship.
Oh.
The idea was, once the Titanic was intentionally sunk, the passengers would be safely evacuated to the Californian.
But that obviously didn't happen. What went wrong?
No, it didn't. And to this day, Captain Lord's actions remain a mystery. Some believe he panicked. Others think he was simply incompetent. But there are those who suspect he deliberately delayed the rescue, following orders from someone higher up.
Wow, this just keeps getting more and more complex. 2 ships, a potential insurance scam, a fire, a mystery rescue ship. I feel like I'm in the middle of a maritime mystery novel.
It is a tangled web we're weaving, but don't worry, we'll help you navigate it.
Okay.
If we carefully examine the evidence, piece by piece, we can start to make sense of it all.
Okay, I'm ready to keep digging. I'm particularly interested in hearing about the wreckage. I've heard there are some interesting findings down there that could support the switch theory.
You heard right. We'll delve into those findings, along with some counter-arguments to the theory. But first, let's take a moment to gather our thoughts.
Sounds like a good plan. Let's take a deep breath and get ready to plunge even deeper into this Titanic mystery.
Indeed.
Okay, so we've kind of laid out the groundwork for the Titanic switch theory. But now I'm ready to get down to like the nitty-gritty.
Okay.
What does the actual wreckage tell us?
Well, the wreckage, even after over a century on the ocean floor, still has some tales to tell.
Oh.
And those tales fuel the switch theory fire.
Okay.
Take, for instance, the discovery of what seems to be a longitudinal bulkhead. In the stern section.
Okay.
Now, this bulkhead doesn't appear in the original blueprints.
Okay.
For either the Titanic or the Olympic.
Hold on, a bulkhead that's not on the plans. What's the significance of that?
Well, some researchers believe it could be evidence of a hasty repair job on the Olympic.
Right.
After her run-in with the Hawk.
Oh, right, yeah.
Remember the extensive damage we talked about?
Yeah.
It's possible this bulkhead was a temporary fix, never intended to be part of the original design.
So they're suggesting the shipyard just kind of patched up the Olympic and hoped no one would notice? That's a pretty bold move. What else have they found down there?
Well, there's another intriguing clue.
Okay.
Traces of gray paint found beneath the black hull paint on the wreckage.
Right.
Interestingly, the Olympic used gray paint as an undercoat, while the Titanic didn't.
Different paint. Seriously. That seems like an obvious giveaway. Why wouldn't they repaint the whole thing if they were going through all this trouble?
You'd think they would, right?
Yeah.
But remember, we're talking about minute traces of paint on a wreck that's been submerged for over 100 years.
Yeah.
It's a tiny detail. Could be easily overlooked, especially amidst the chaos of the sinking.
All right, I'll grant you that. But what about the mysterious MP engraving I keep hearing about? Isn't there supposed to be an MP on the bow of the wreck where the Titanic's name should be? That sounds pretty damning.
That's a favorite piece of evidence for the switch theory enthusiasts.
Yeah.
They suggest those letters could be remnants of the Olympic's original nameplate.
Oh, okay.
Hastily covered up with the Titanic's name.
Wow, a hidden name. That's straight out of a spy movie, but I can hear a but coming.
Of course.
Yeah.
As compelling as these pieces of evidence sound, none of them definitively prove a switch.
Right.
The bulkhead, for example, could have been added to the Titanic for reasons we simply don't know anymore. And the paint. Well, maybe both ships used the same gray paint at some point, or perhaps those traces came from something else entirely.
Okay.
It's a murky underwater world down there.
Yeah.
With plenty of room for interpretation.
So even the physical evidence isn't a slam dunk.
It's not.
It's like a historical puzzle where the pieces could fit together in multiple ways.
Yeah.
But let's say, just for the sake of argument, that the switch did happen.
Okay.
How could they possibly keep such a massive secret under wraps? Wouldn't someone have talked?
That's where we enter the realm of speculation and alleged cover-ups.
Yep.
Some conspiracy theorists claim that surviving crew members were forced into silence.
Okay.
They say they were pressured, perhaps threatened into signing the Official Secrets Act.
Oh, wow.
To prevent them from ever revealing the truth.
Oh, talk about a conspiracy.
Yeah.
Forced silence, official secrets. This is getting intense.
Yeah.
But is there any proof of this?
Unfortunately, the evidence for these claims is mostly anecdotal. There are stories of crew members facing threats of imprisonment or blacklisting if they spoke out.
Yeah.
But concrete proof is hard to come by.
So it's a case of he said, she said, with no clear way to know for sure.
Exactly. It's this lack of definitive proof that makes the Titanic switch theory so frustratingly slippery. Tantalizing hints and whispers abound, but nothing solid enough to nail down the truth.
All right, I can see how this is a tough one to crack. But let's shift gears a bit.
Okay.
Surely there must be some strong counter-arguments to this theory.
Right.
Yeah. Aside from the mind-boggling logistics of swapping two massive ships, what evidence debunks this whole switch idea?
Well, there's the extensive photographic evidence that documents both the Olympic and the Titanic during their construction and early voyages. These images clearly show distinct differences between the ships, making a covert swap seem highly unlikely.
So basically they're saying, we have pictures, we have proof, it's not the same ship. Seems straightforward enough.
Yeah.
What do the conspiracy theorists say to that?
Well, they argue that swapping hull numbers, even planting artifacts at the wreck site, wouldn't have been that difficult, especially if you were orchestrating a cover-up of this magnitude.
Okay, so it boils down to who you choose to believe and what evidence you find most compelling.
Yeah.
This is one for the history detectives.
Indeed.
Okay.
Each side interprets the evidence differently. It's a historical tug of war with both sides pulling hard on their respective ropes.
Right.
But before we wrap up our investigation, there's one final piece of evidence that often gets tossed into the mix. The alleged silence of the crew.
We touched on this earlier.
We did.
The idea that surviving crew members were pressured into staying quiet.
Yeah.
But why? What's the implication here?
The implication is that there was a concerted effort to suppress information about the sinking. Perhaps to protect the reputation of the White Star Line. Or even more powerful interests. Imagine if those crew members held the key to what really happened that night.
And were forced to take that knowledge to their graves. It sends chills down my spine just thinking about it. But if they were silenced, why? What were they hiding? What was at stake?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? If there was indeed a cover-up, it raises some disturbing questions about power, greed, and the length to which people will go to protect their secrets.
This is getting heavy. We've gone from a ship swap to a potential cover-up. It's like peeling back layers of a historical onion, and each layer is more intriguing and more unsettling than the last. So where do we go from here? How do we even begin to make sense of all this?
Well, in our final segment, we'll attempt to do just that. We'll recap the most compelling points for and against the Titanic switch theory, leaving you, the listener, to weigh the evidence and come to your own conclusions. Is it a far-fetched theory? Or a plausible explanation for one of history's greatest maritime tragedies?
Sounds like a plan. Let's set sail for the final leg of our Titanic deep dive. All right, after that deep dive into the wreckage and whispers of cover-ups, I think we need a lifeboat. A mental one, at least. Can we try to make some sense of all this?
Let's see if we can chart a course through these murky waters. Remember, the Titanic switch theory hinges on the idea that the Olympic, not the Titanic, met her fate that night.
Right, right. And we've heard some pretty compelling arguments for both sides. Can we start with a quick recap of the most intriguing evidence that points towards a possible switch?
Certainly. We began with the Olympic's troubled history. Those two collisions, particularly the one with the HMS Hawk, created significant damage and potential financial strain for the White Star Line.
Yeah.
This establishes a possible motive
Yeah.
for a drastic solution, like an insurance scam.
Yeah. And then we had those curious discrepancies. Extra portholes appearing on the Titanic, the uneven window spacing, and the fact that the Titanic, unlike her sister ship, wasn't open to public inspection before her maiden voyage. All very suspicious, wouldn't you say?
Indeed. Those details, while not conclusive on their own, contribute to the overall sense that something might be amiss.
Yeah.
And of course, we can't forget the conveniently timed dry dock visit,
Right.
where the alleged switch supposedly took place.
Oh, and the fire, that coal bunker fire that was already burning before the Titanic even left Belfast.
Right.
Was that just a terrible coincidence or a calculated part of the plan?
Right.
It's a question that keeps swirling in my mind.
It's a question that likely won't ever have a definitive answer, but it certainly adds another layer of intrigue to this whole story.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we have the enigma of the Californian sailing through the night with no passengers, no cargo, just a hold full of woolen sweaters.
Yeah.
What was her purpose that night? Was she truly meant to be the rescue ship, as some believe?
Okay, so we've got a damaged ship, a potential financial motive, some curious discrepancies, a mysterious fire, and a phantom rescue ship with a strange cargo. It's enough to make even the most skeptical among us raise an eyebrow.
Yeah.
But let's be fair here.
Right.
What about the evidence against the switch theory?
Okay.
What are the strongest arguments that debunk this whole idea?
Well, the biggest hurdle for the switch theory is the sheer logistical nightmare of swapping two massive ocean liners without anyone noticing.
Right.
Think about it. It would require an unbelievable level of coordination, manpower, and secrecy to pull that off.
Right.
And then there's the matter of the paperwork, the crew manifests, the passenger lists. It all seems almost impossible to manipulate without leaving some trace.
And there's that photographic evidence.
Yeah.
You can't ignore all those pictures and even some film footage showing distinct differences between the Olympic and the Titanic.
Right.
It's hard to argue with visual proof like that.
Exactly. Those images pose a serious challenge to the switch theory.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the Titanic's hull number, 401.
Right.
Found on multiple artifacts recovered from the wreck.
Yeah.
For many, that serves as definitive proof that the ship that sank was indeed the Titanic, not the Olympic in disguise.
A pretty strong piece of evidence, I'll admit. But, as we've been discussing all this, I keep coming back to the alleged silence of the crew.
Yeah.
It's such a chilling thought that those who survived might have been pressured or even threatened into keeping quiet about what they knew. If there was a cover-up, what were they hiding?
Right.
It was so important that it had to be buried with the Titanic.
Those are questions that historians and researchers continue to grapple with.
Right.
And while we may never have all the answers, the very act of asking those questions, of digging deeper into the layers of history, is what keeps the spirit of inquiry alive.
So after all this, what's the final verdict? Was the Titanic switch theory just a wild conspiracy, or is there something more to it?
That's for you, the listener, to decide.
Right.
We've presented the evidence, the arguments,
the
mysteries, and the unanswered questions. Now it's your turn to weigh it all and come to your own conclusion.
Okay.
Is it a far-fetched theory or a plausible explanation for one of history's greatest maritime tragedies?
This deep dive hasn't just been about ships and conspiracy theories.
Right.
It's been about the enduring power of curiosity, the thrill of exploring the unknown,